What's up, Unreal creators? We're at the top of the month, and that means new free Unreal Engine Marketplace content. Get ready for the long haul with game-ready trucks and trailers, effortlessly add dynamic radial menus, easily extract root motion data for your animations, venture into lush tropical jungles, and transform your towns into entire kingdoms with this month's content. New to the permanent collection, head off on an exhilarating safari with a collection of African animals. Download these free products from the marketplace before time runs out. While you're there, shop over 800 products at 50% off during the August flash sale. Propel your pipelines with dazzling particle systems, advanced plugins and blueprint systems, and out-of-this-world environments. The flash sale ends Friday, August 7th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. For community developers in Europe, there are brand new training opportunities now available to you from our authorized training centers. These partners will provide live, hands-on training in a virtual, classroom-like environment available in various languages. Visit the Unreal Engine feed to find out more and sign up. As we eagerly anticipate Season 4, HBO's hit sci-fi series Westworld explores the technological landscape of the near future, from lifelike robots and advanced AI to autonomous vehicles and blockchain. In Season 3, showrunners Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy and VFX supervisor Jay Worth also turn to futuristic techniques behind the camera with help from Unreal Engine. And now to give a shout out to our top weekly karma earners, Everynone, The Chaos Spectrum, Clockwork Ocean, Churrer, Mama Marcis, Nape Zadam, Evil Cleric, Gamble 270, Shadow River, and Loop Alanad. Thank you all so much for your help. First up on our spotlights is the absolutely endearing Epic Mega Grant recipient, Mitzy Makes It. To be released as a children's book and interactive app, Mitzy Makes It introduces STEAM concepts to young children and aims to inspire more girls to pursue STEAM fields later in life. Learn more about Mitzy and Shazzy Gustafson's development on the project via mitzymakesit.com. And to totally change gears, released earlier this week, Hellbound is a classic FPS action game focused on speed, gore, and metal music from Argentinian studio Cybot Studios. Not for the faint of heart, download Hellbound on Steam. Last up, take control of nature in couch co-op puzzle platformer Keepers of the Trees. Test your platforming mettle, work with a friend to solve puzzles by growing special plants, and explore a lush fantasy forest world. Available now on Steam. Thanks for watching our news and community spotlight.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I'm your host, Victor Broden, and my guest today is none other than Asher Zhu. And right as that happened, we had a little bit of a interesting camera flip that you might happen to see again throughout the stream. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Hi. Hello, chat.
Hope y'all out there are doing all right.
Yeah.
Asher, what are we going to cover today?
And mute the actual stream. Okay. Wait, sorry again?
There we go. I was asking, what are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the various approaches you can do volumetric effects in our engine, including volumetric fog, volumetric cloud, which is a new thing that's upcoming in 4.26, and some Niagara, some particle approach that could be integrated with the Niagara system. That could blend very well with the two system I mentioned above. So yeah, my camera will do that thing like every 20 minutes, and don't mind, it's just heating up.
We'll I think we'll survive. All right, whenever you're ready, feel free. The screen's yours.
All right, cool. Wait, I'm on.
Yeah.
All right, so Victor approached me because a previous thing I did. This one. So this thing, I call it the dry ice demo. That's used volumetric fog. Before it was pretty popular on Twitter. So Victor approached me to talk about it, and thought it was. I was very honored and excited to be here, and I thought it was because volumetric fog is a 4.16 feature. So I decided to do something new with it. And the catch is I only have 1 week to do everything. And it was quite a ride, but a little scary when I think back. But yeah, I think I did it because the new thing I did was pretty popular on Twitter too. So that was this one. Yeah, it's a cloud painter, I call it. And I'm very impressed by Unreal Engine's current status because its ability to assemble a wide array of features and modules and technology to create something new, something novel. And I could do that with a lot of ease, given that you know what I'm doing. And I'm just very happy what I can do within 1 week. Okay, I'll wait until the video plays. Maybe some guys haven't seen it.
It's beautiful, so we don't mind watching.
Thank you. Guys, I'm a little bit scared. I'm nervous. Can we get a Bible thump in the chat, please? To ease my mind.
For visibility, you should know that this stream was a bit of a last minute call, so Asher has definitely put a lot of effort into being able to put this together for me or for us in such a short amount of time.
Thank you. Wow, that makes me very happy. I always wanted to do this. Yeah.
And we're excited to have you here.
All right. Yeah, and another thing is because I have a limited time, I might not be able to prepare the stream as perfectly as I hoped, and I have good points. But if I haven't explained something too clear and you have questions, please feel free to type in the chat. And okay, let's get into it. I'm going to talk about the... Wait, this is a video. I thought it was the engine. I thought why it's not moving. Okay, I'm going to talk about the dry ice demo for a little bit because it's... wait, I forgot to put up my slides. Yeah, because it's a default solution for volumetrics and it's very stable. It has been out since 4.16. It's very efficient, scalable, and have been put into released games for 2 or 3 years now. And it generates just a very good start point to learn about the volumetric system and volume materials. Excuse me, I need to find a good place to put the trade chat. There we go. Okay. So I'm gonna open a simple map. The way volumetric fog work is like it can work with the light very well. What we love is a kind of light shaft here, and it can work with spotlight, local lights, and many other light types. Like this, you can see there is a core here. And it works with shadow too. If I am here, this. You can see the light is actually occluded by the box here, and the volumetric fog will reflect that, and that's very nice. The way it works is the fog is presented and is vocalized and presented as a 3D volume and fixed into the camera. So if we type in volumetric fog grid size Z here and type in a small value like 32, default is 128, and disable temporal pre-projection. You can see the slices of the volumetric fog. It gives you a pretty good idea of how it works. And because, of course, we have the option to change the view distance because it's a volume, it's a 3D texture field in the camera cone. So we can trade accuracy. We can trade distance for accuracy. This is a 6,000 centimeters here. If we pull that near to the camera, I can see the accuracy here is increased. But of course, then it doesn't have the range it used to have. So that's a trade-off you might want to make if you are using volumetric fog in your game. So the temporal reprojection I disabled before basically does this. And you can see it's much smoother even with the same sampling count. That's because it's using past a few frames to kind of not blur, but filter the volumetric fog to make it look smoother. But there is still artifacts. So that's because we have a very low sampling size. The grid size Z 32 here. If I typed in the default value, which is 128, then yeah, buttery smooth fog. There is some, wait, I hid something here. Wait. Yeah, this is the main thing that you can play with to know more about volumetric fog and make a screenshot if you want. This is the parameters I used just now.
We got some questions in chat. They're wondering which engine version you're on.
I'm on, unfortunately, dev rendering. That's the development branch of Unreal Engine. You can compile that. You can pull that off GitHub and compile that yourself. And the volumetric cloud feature we are using today is going to be released in 4.26, which is the end of year. Of course, the preview version will be before that. But if you want to play with it now, you could just do that. Compile the engine from GitHub yourself, and it's a very, I highly recommend you to learn to do how to do that because it's very fun and it will make you feel like a pro immediately. So yeah, and next thing, let me check my bullet points. Noise. All right, so this works with local light and translucency. Let me adjust the global fog to a low value. Okay, smaller. So this is the volumetric fog too. It just uses a local volume material to fill in the cube. The cube just acts like a vector. So if I go near it, you can see that because I turned down the global volumetric fog very low, there is not, you can't see any here. But if I go near it, you can see that, wait, what's happening? You can see the fog is affected by the light too. And I have a translucent object here. If I drag it in, you can see it blends with translucent pretty well. And that's actually pretty important because translucent usually will have some problems in the deferred rendering pipeline. And how did I make this? And it's actually very simple. It's just a volume texture hooked directly into the extinction, which you can understand it as density. And volume material is something like this. This is a real 3D texture. Maybe some of you guys know about the pseudo volume, like sliced 3D texture. which is actually 2D texture, but read in the way that you could treat that as 3D texture. But this is a engine feature now. You can say it's actually just volume texture. It's real 3D texture. And you can choose view mode tracing to volume to see how it looks as a cube. So the UVW is hooked to the absolute world position and multiplied by a very small value because world position is in centimeter. And because this is huge, if we don't multiply that, we will get something very dense. So it's just a way to present it better. Yeah, the power is just to trying to make it sharper, and bias is just a value that's added to the final density. If we increase that, you can see that it just fills in, and if we decrease that, it slows it out. And it's pretty straightforward how volume material works. And if you want to do that, it's very simple. Just select the volume in material domain. And yeah, the nice thing about volume material is volume material was first introduced along with the volumetric fog in 2016. And that volume material was only for volumetric fog until now, until volume cloud is out. So we now have unified volume material for both fog and volumetric cloud. I'll show a. I mentioned I'm on dev rendering, which is a derived branch. If you compile that, just for the record, I'm on change list 139799994. I've been using this version for a week and it never crashes. It has some small bugs, but it's definitely good enough for you to play with. And you can just type in cloud and we'll find the volumetric cloud here. I have put one in my thing, so I'm not just dragging that. If I set enable, you can see. So this volumetric cloud actually use almost exact volume material as a volumetric fog. This part is just is the same, except the scale is much larger because the sky is big. Truer words have never been said. So yeah, and this is not directly connected to the extinction because we have optimization that if you hook in how does it? You can hook that in the volume advanced output as a conservative density. What it does is this is used to accelerate to the remarching by early skipping expensive material evaluation. What that means is for the empty pixels, we don't want to remarch small steps and with a whole range because that's very expensive and a waste. So we could just hook this in this, and that would loop back into the volumetric advanced input. So this is basically the same as this, except there's an optimization. You can, yeah. And I have another layer of filter. I use absolute world position, the B channel, which is just X, Y, Z to filter the density. What it does is if it's higher than the height I'm setting here, it will be extracted from the density from the volume texture sampling. So if I lower the value here, the cloud will grow thinner. This is a visual presentation of how this works. So yeah, what you can do, I will explain this later. And what you can do is we can just put this into a material function and use the use a static switch to connect with both volumetric fog and volumetric cloud. So the cloud and the fog will use the same material. That takes us to, yeah, let me, I feel like I haven't explained things super clear. If you guys have any questions, just type in the chat.
Someone was wondering if it's possible to limit the, if it's possible to set a bounding box for the volumetric clouds. For example, if you didn't want the clouds to render beyond 1,000 feet.
Yeah, of course. That's a built-in parameter here, which I plan to talk about it later.
Sweet, yeah.
This basically, okay. I just talk about it later. So to this demo, I'll explain how to make noises look beautiful. All right, so this is actually just 3 noises stacked together. I could disable the pen, disable the 2 layers of detail. So you can see it's actually just a 3D noise and filtered with distance field. And I could increase the distance field height here, similar to what I did just now with the cloud. Yeah, as you can see, it works in a similar way. And if I pan this, oh wait, sorry, no. Yeah, if I pan this, this is just a single layer of volume texture. So we can see it's not very interesting, but still a little bit interesting though. It's just a painting texture. And if we add another layer of painting texture on top of it, immediately it has this kind of fluid theme kind like feature to it. Almost have some character of real fog. And then we add another layer. Then it looks much better. And we can use some curl noise to distort the input UVW a little bit to make it a little more interesting. It might be hard to see in the stream, so I just pump it up like 10, 50. Yeah, this is what it does. Could make it like super stylish even. I just keep it a small value. Yeah, this is basically how you make very nice flowy cloud. So there are a lot of other parameters here. There are most of them are art directable parameters, like curl noise scale. We could make this like 25 something. Yeah, this almost like the cloud in Fortnite. And we can change the height. I feel like I don't have to talk for this part. You guys know.
It looks beautiful.
Thank you. And yeah, of course, color. And the color here is actually controlled by a color. What's it? Yeah, a curve atlas. Basically, what it does is you have a curve here, then this curve. Then the curve is automatically baked into a texture, which then in turn can be read by the material graph. So I have a lot of curve. Give me a bit. Oh, here. Yeah. This is a curve atlas. Atlas is in a way that a lot of curves are just compiled into the single one texture. And the reading and writing interface is pretty convenient. You don't need to worry about this texture part. It does that for you. What you can do is basically just change the x-axis is a density, I think. Oh, for this one, the x-axis is a distance to the ground. Wait, let me change that back. And if I pull this down, you can see it gets darker near the ground, and the purpose is to fake ambient occlusion. If you pull this down, then yeah, that doesn't look good. Sorry, I didn't know I do that. All right, so I'm not going to talk about this one too much because I have read a pretty comprehensive blog about it. You can type in asher.gg. That's my website, and there is a post about that. I explained exactly how to make these effects, a little bit about volumetrics and local controls, 3D noise, and how to make them, how to use distance function, how to stack noises together to get good results, and how to make fake shadows to volumetric fog, and some optimization tips. Yeah, check out that asher.gg. So let's skip to the cloud demo. This one. Is it feasible to use it in large open world environment? Yes, that's why I did it. Well, that's not why I did it. That's why the cloud component is developed. I keep calling it cloud component. It's just the volumetric cloud system. Yeah, and yeah, this is the thing. Just show off a little bit. Wait, let me type in the show off comment to make it a little more sharp. And yeah, I'll first give you a quick tour of the cloud volumetric cloud. So this the layer session is just basically control as a question I was asked before. This basically control the render range. If I set this pretty low because I want the cloud to be close to the ground. If I change that, yeah, you can see what it does. And we have layer height, which just control the height, and tracing max distance to control the range. And the cloud tracing session is the most important thing to balance the visual and the performance. Because the frame rate is not good right now. Just turn this to 0. Turn this back. Yeah, use some save-out value higher than usual to have a sharper picture for the stream. So the view sample count scale is basically the sample count. You can see what it does, and you need a higher count to have sharp image quality, but this will have linear cost. And reflection sample count, I'm not using reflection. Shadow, shadow is another thing that costs a lot. if I turn that on, you can see the shadow trace is very rough. If you need to try what kind of value that gets you just a good enough picture without too much cost. And we have a shadow trace distance, which controls the range of how long the shadow should be tracing. So yeah, so if you don't, so this is a remarching approach against the volumetric fog, which is voxelization. If you don't know what remarching is, this should give you a pretty good idea of what it is. It marches rays. Spoiler. Yeah, I'll play with it a little bit to show this is a real thing you can do in video game now. Yeah. A little bit. Okay. It's all available on dev rendering branch right now. Yes. You should try that. No, I added hotkey to change the game, the day of time, the time of day. Wait, yes. All right. I just fly silently.
Perhaps we need to make some sound effects for Manny here.
Can I do beatboxing?
I can, but I'm not sure I'm gonna do that on the Unreal Engine live stream.
Do it, do it, do it.
Maybe next time.
All right. Iron Man landing.
And I just want to apologize to chat why I'm so quiet here. I have construction going on right outside my door, so I need to stay muted for most of the time.
Wait, where is up? Okay, this is up. All right, I have used the I forgot what that called. I will talk about that later. There is a plugin in the engine allow you to change the time of day pretty easily and very conveniently. But of course, it doesn't do the night circle because for night you usually want a completely different light setup than daytime, and you want different particles and even different scene objects. So I did that manually too. So I just have a wonky switch here. Boom. This is really fun to play with. I feel like you just play this for the entire stream and people will be happy. So nighttime.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. I was very happy making this because I'm a hardcore DayZ fan and I've been playing survival. Oh, my camera did that again. And I've been playing all of the survival games before it's cool. And if this was in DayZ or anything, I would be so crazed. Yeah, okay, that thing. All right. Don't forget about the presentation. Yeah. So I need to introduce to a few features I made here. Forgot how to fly. All right. What happens when I get into the fog is actually this is a volumetric fog, but when I flow near it, it will be replaced by the volumetric. Wait, did I say volumetric fog? Yeah, this is a volumetric cloud, and when I fly into it or near it, it will be replaced slowly with a volumetric fog, and you might be able to see the transition. Okay, I'll make the. Oh, this will be more obvious. This looks ugly, but you will get the point across. Yeah, there is a small color hue change up here. If you didn't see it, it's okay. I'll explain it better later. I just want to show. So I've disabled the transition to a cloud to fog. That's transition from cloud to into fog. Is that before or after the particle? I'm sorry. All right, I just that was weird. Transition. Honestly, can't remember where that was. Have I talked about the particle, the Niagara? Have I talked about the show flag dot particles space 0?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah. Okay. So for the near distance, we are we are using volumetric fog, and it has different layers of the fog to make the ground look more interesting. Because if without that, it looks really dull. You don't feel like you are inside the cloud. And yeah, that was I'm pretty proud of this one because it makes really give you the feel that you are inside the cloud. If we disable the particles by typing show flag dot particles space 0, we can. Okay, this is not a good. This is not good position to show that here. So this is with particles sprites, and this is without. Yeah, so the ground part is another layer, which is added on top of the big layer that replaces the volumetric cloud in the near distance. And yeah, let me explain the cloud material a little bit. Question: the unified volume material already in the engine? So volume material for anything other than volumetric fog? Yes, that's the idea. Although you need to be a little bit of work to make sure switching between the two works without problem. But yeah, that's what I'm gonna talk about later in a more practical example. And yeah, the material. About the sun sky, you can enable this plugin just by typing sun. You have the sun position calculator. If you enable that, you can drag a sun sky actor into the theme, and you will have this actor to take input of any position on Earth, the latitude, longitude, time zone, and north offset. You have that set, and you can have a month, a day of the year. Then you can just drag solar time to make the sun move, and the skylight will move along. The skylight intensity will adjust with that too. This should be more clear. Yeah, what I did in game is just setting this when I press a key. Yeah, very neat thing to know about. And yeah, it helped me a lot to make the demo look more versatile in very limited time. And yeah, let me adjust that to a nice looking angle. Here, okay. So to the cloud material here. It's a little bit similar, not a bit. It's very similar to the dry ice material I talked about before, and in fact, it's actually I just made this on top of that. The important thing again is stacking noises. If I disable the detail noise, 2 layers of detail noise, you can see it's just a shape. general shape of the cloud on top of the mountain, and I can make that pen too. I'm not like I'm not enabling the time because I need to know where the good spots is to show off the features. But if we enable the time, it can actually move. Let's set it to a higher speed. And if I enable another layer of detail layer to subtract the density from the cloud, it will look much nicer. And then another layer to give more details. And this doesn't look very good. That's because we need temporal filtering to smooth out the shape, but that doesn't work very well if the cloud is moving very fast. So 0.3 should work. Or let me see. Yeah, this now works pretty okay-ish. And you can see there's a huge chunk of blue here that you could change by using art directable parameters like ambient, multi-scattering ambient occlusion. If we lower that value, you can see it looks much nicer from this angle. But the problem is if I go into the cloud, it doesn't have too much contrast to make it feel believable. So that's a balance of art direction that you will choose to okay-ish. And next thing. Yep. Should I talk about this? All right, this is stacking noise part. And how do we control how the clouds blow over to the mountain? Looks okay-ish, yeah. How do we control this blows over to the mountain? That's according to the height map, which is similar to the distance field we mentioned in the dry ice demo. But because it's a height map and it could have almost unlimited range. The distance field have a limited range because it requires every static mesh to have a pre-built mesh distance field, which can be super huge. And you can actually adjust distance field parameters here just mentioned in the world settings. You can choose how far the distance will go and the object, the mesh distance field range and stuff just mentioned. That's not related to this material here. What I'm talking about is because it's a height map, so you can do this. Yeah, that's the main thing that we could use to art direct where the cloud we wanted to go. We have the max distance and clamp, height map clamp if we want some clouds on a uniform layer, uniform height like this. Like it doesn't look good now, but if you want to have, like if we stand here and want to have a huge layer of cloud below this, you can do that, of course. And yeah, the height map could be controlled by a editor widget I made. And yeah, I know you guys are very curious about this, but I need to explain some other things before I can get into this. What it does, it basically can add another layer of height onto the landscape, so we can control how we want the cloud to be. I just do a quick example and switch to the next topic. Yeah. Wait, independent first. Okay. Yeah. That's what you can do with edit widget. Wait, this doesn't look good. No. I kind of feel like I need to do a better example of that. Make smaller strength value. Yeah, you can click, make clouds around the mountain. Something like this. All right, I just undo all of that. And I still need to talk about the other parameter of the cloud. All right, what else do we have got here? Details, time. Not a lot actually. Yeah, okay, I'll get into the actual material nodes a little bit. It's the main thing here. So the height thing I mentioned just now is just sampled here. There is a landscape height here. It's all white because it's larger than 1, but this is actually the height data of the landscape. And combined with the mask we could do with the edit widget I made. And that's added on top of the landscape height, then do some filtering here, parameters. Then that's subtracted from the sample density here. And this is how we changed. This is the part where we changed the cloud shape using the parameters just now. And it looks like a lot of parameters, but actually it's just doing the same thing for 4 times. It's the same volume material. We just sample different channels of it. And with the different UV inputs. So you can have a different intensity and scale and stuff to control how you want the volume textures to affect the cloud shape. And yeah, there is other curl. Wait, I feel like I have changed something that I didn't want to. Wait, this looks weird, but I can't tell why. There are other parameters like curl strength. So I make that pretty small. Yeah, the similar thing with a fog. Have kind of stylish outcome. This don't look good. Yeah, this kind of have a interesting stylish feature to it. You can definitely do different things with clouds in your game. And yeah, another thing that I should mention along with this is the camera distance based density reduced. That's just basically how I blended the cloud material with the volumetric fog. Wait for me to do 50 undo. All right, can't undo. So if I disable the volumetric fog, and when I go near the cloud, you can see it's actually just pulling back. And this is how I blended the volumetric fog with cloud. And it's actually, if I enable the fog, you can see it almost work without the trace. There is some visual artifacts here, and it's being addressed by our graphics engineer, Sebastian Hilaire. It will be fixed soon. But yeah, that's how basically how it does it. Cloud, fog, cloud, fog. And that part is actually pretty easy. Just get the camera position and get the lens and fade in how far you want it to fade out and give a blending range. Then subtract that from the sample value before. Then done. Okay, question. The temporal filter seems to struggle with fast-moving fog lights. The volumetric beam seems to lag behind as the light ray moves. Yeah, that one you could. There are parameter for it. It's r.volumetric fog history weight. Yeah, you can change the way to make recent frames weight heavier than before, so it's kind of faster reaction, but the temporal smoothing effect will be less intensive. It's a trade-off to what you want to do. Is this supported by the ray tracer? If so, what's the performance hit here? I'm not sure about that, but from what I understand, it shouldn't have already be working with ray tracing. But if you're just using it for the Vista, it shouldn't matter because ray tracing, yeah, it's very tricky to make ray tracing with video effects. So it's actually a pretty big topic. And volumetric fog doesn't work with ray trace shadow either. How can I make use of volumetric fog and virtual textures with internal label design? A prison facility. Virtual texture. What do you mean by virtual texture? Question whether it's possible to cast shadows from this. Yes, it supports shadow. The volumetric fog supports shadow lighting from a lot of different lights, but the volumetric sorry, the water. But the volumetric fog. Wait. Alright, but the volumetric cloud only have a directional shadowing and skylight shadowing, and it can cast shadow with directional light onto the world, and it can cast AO, very approximated AO onto the world too. Question: will it be possible to cast shadow from the? Okay, answer this. Can it work on PS4 or X1? How costly is it? Of course, it will work, but I'm not sure currently. But of course, this is a major feature. It will work with various consoles. How costly is it? I think it will run on PS4, but it's still a balance between visual and cost. Like if your game is entirely about volumetric cloud, of course, you can dedicate more resources to that. How can you get rid of the bending in volumetric as we just saw on your screen as well? Okay, if you use the temporal, of course you will be using temporal reprojection. You can decrease the history weight to make it smoother, or you can increase the wait, what's it called? Grid Z? The fog grid Z, yeah. For matchfog dot grid size Z to give it more slices, but it's a linear cost, yes. Confirmation to can I wait? I feel like I would be answering question for the entire stream.
Yeah, I've been picking the ones that are sort of, some of them are about the same, and so I've been highlighting them, and we can get to them later in the stream if you want.
Yeah. Okay. You are picking question for me. It's not like I don't want to answer them.
Feel free to pick them if you want to, but I'm letting you know that I'm keeping an eye on them and making sure that we capture as many of them as possible for the end.
Okay, cool. All right, I will. Yeah, if I have energy left, I will answer questions in the end of the stream. I really like your hair color. Thank you. It goes with my t-shirt. I have a bunch of this, so I don't have to pick. All right, let's push the progress. I was talking about the material and the camera counting, and I explained the hybrid fog cloud solution. Okay, let me show a few slides here. Yeah, I kind of mentioned it, but wait. That's not part. I kind of mentioned it, but I want to show a few slides to compare volumetric fog with volumetric clouds. So volumetric fog support all the light types all packed in, and it's generally just very easy to play with, and you can get results. And support local complexity like translucency and other volumetric shaders. But it has a limit because range. Yeah, it can typically just go around 100 meters, and it will have a pretty low performance/cost ratio. But that depends too. Volumetric cloud, it doesn't support the versatile light types, but it's designed for far distance and support the main types of light and shadows, like directional light with shadow and skylight AO, and can cast AO and shadow to the world. So what are we achieving, or what we want to achieve for the solution is first to be able to for a efficient workflow and for the final release game is first we want unified material for volumetric fog and cloud. Otherwise, you need to constantly sync the two material, which will be a huge pain. And yeah, I just showed a bit how that works. It's actually pretty simple. And we've talked about this material before. This is a camera part, this is a height map part, this is the assembly part, and this is a core noise, which I use to make the kind of stylish cloud. So this is basically it. And this is this function is called inside this master material. Yeah. Unreal Engine has a very nice thing called called static switch. It means you can compile. You can have a small checkbox, and that small checkbox controls how which path you want to go in the material. The material button much here. Yes. Yeah, this checkbox controls which path we want to go here. Like if it is cloud, we will use this. If it's not, we will use this. And same as below. And the nice thing, the best thing about it is it's considered in compile time. So if you have two in this material instance, so for this instance, it wouldn't compile all the things that goes along the false path. So everything here will not be compiled into this material instance. I'm not saying that 100% correctly, but that's basically how it works. And so this is a material instance for the cloud. And for the volumetric fog material, as we can see here, it basically it just inherited from the cloud material, but instead it has a checkbox unchecked. So for the cloud material, it will use this, but for the fog material, it will use this. But because these two are the same material function, the material names will be completely the same. So you just inherit everything that the cloud has. So when I go in, the shape is just 100% the same. Even the light behavior is different. Yeah, so that gets us to talk about the details of the near distance fog. Wait, I should disable the time first. I can disable the time. That's a superpower. Okay. So as I have mentioned before, there are two main detail parts that's added to the near plane. One is a ground fog, one is the sprites. The ground fog, I have a feeling that I'm talking about this material too much. Is it getting confusing? Let me know if it's too confusing. I will try to clear things up. So this was a big cloud. This is the big cloud. This is a small cloud. Is that simpler? So this is almost exactly the same thing as this, but it uses different parameters, similar to the dry ice one. I just kind of migrated it into the material and added the density together, so we can have this on top of this. And another thing that I'm not sure if this is very useful, very generally useful, but you can do it, is because this material name is the same name as inside this one, but I don't want them to be mixed together. I need this to be this to be different. So I added a wait, what is what's a word for prefix but in the tail? The postfix. Anyway, I just want to append the underlying fog to every parameter here. And I could do that with manual labor, but manual labor is getting more expensive nowadays. So what you can do is you can actually just select all of this, and inside the text editor, you can see the material names here. The node names here. Like this is a opacity fog, and this is a scale fog. So this was not scale fog, this was scale before, and I wanted to add every parameter name with underlying fog. So you could just do that with reg xp. Suffix, that's a word, okay? Thank you. I learned something today. And yeah, you can use regular expression, or I don't know, there must be something very convenient for that, right? So I just replaced everything that started with the parameter name and appended this on the end. And then I copied this entire thing, and then I paste them in the material editor. So that's that's actually pretty useful. I can think of a lot of times.
Yeah,
several times I've used it.
That's a neat trick.
Neat trick. All right. That takes us to the editor widget. Wait, I need to enable the flag particles. All right. Again, it doesn't look very good, but it's good enough for a concept proof that this will definitely work. And to the editor widget, so this thing looks very fancy, works very fancy, and people will think you are a pro, that you modify the engine to fit your needs. And it's actually very simple to add something like this. Okay, sorry, I phased out a little bit. You can right click and editor utility, select editor utility widget, and double click it. It's basically just a UMG widget that you could use inside the editor. We can like drag a button here and make it. This is a very important step that to make the background color darker, it will look much better. This should be the default. See? And yeah, you can click button and select, click the plus button on clicked, and you can like have all kinds of editor utility here. For example, you can get selected actors for each. And you could delete them. I'm just doing something simple here to demonstrate how it works. So hit compile. And if we right click on this, you can see a run editor utility widget button, and this is the button we got. Wait, it's a little bit too dark. Is it not? I'm sorry, but I need to get the color right. All right. So if we click on a random victim here and click this murder button, boom, it's gone. Magic. So yeah, that's a very simple demonstration of how the edit widget works. And okay, let me reset all this. So for this widget, yeah, you could, I can drag this out so this looks normal, and you can append that to every window tab you want, and hide tab. So what happens when I click start editing cloud is it calls the function of another blueprint I've put into the scene to hide the cloud layer. Wait, what is this? What? Okay. To hide the cloud, but show up the landscape I put there before as a kind of, I call it cloud landscape map. Cloud map landscape. Yeah, I can draw what I want, draw cloud height offset and cloud density offset on the landscape, which you are seeing as a wireframe right now. And because I have the landscape showing up, I could just edit it with the in-engine landscape editing tool. It will draw the height and density, which is just a layer of landscape weight map here in this render target. Why are you going from this straight to this? I need to 50%. All right. Sorry. If I pen something here and click on finish editing cloud, it will just capture the weight we just painted onto this render target. And this is not like super robust way to do it, but because I had limited time, and it's a very makeshifty way to do it. And because the landscape, the cloud map landscape is not gonna be compiled into the final game, so if it works, it doesn't really have too much performance concern. Yeah, that would be reflected to the height map we've showed before in the cloud material. And another thing that's very nice about the editor widget. Wait, I need some coffee. Is it can tick inside editor. You don't need to run the game or simulate it. It just tick, and you can use the buttons to control and the gate to control if you want to execute any nodes that does things for you. This just basically equals to I keep hitting the finish editing cloud button. So because that's executed every tick, not actually every tick, actually I set a kind of frame a cooldown to it. So I could just it just keeps capturing the height and the weight for me. Do we have any question in the chat, Victor, that I need to answer now?
We can keep going a little bit. I'm still gathering them.
Cool. Will this widget also be available? This has been available since a lot versions ago. You were not paying attention. Tell them. I've remembered you. All right, yeah, you can paint the height offset for the cloud too. Yeah, and this is showing wireframe because I have set kind of distant choice. How do that? Distant lerp, because the boy that's helping me to capturing the landscape here is actually very further away. So I basically did this is very dirty, but it works for me. If I get near to it, it will show the wireframe. If I get far away, it will just show the weight map and the height. Yeah, so when it captures, it won't capture the mesh, the grid. Yeah, that's pretty much sums it up. Anything I'm forgetting about? Not quite. All right, Niagara, next part. Yeah, this is very hacky, but I have excuses. Do you have excuses?
It works.
It works. Niagara in-game show. Ah. Oh, I have showed that, like turn on and turn off the sprite. And another pretty interesting idea is okay, let me go to the nice spots.
Someone was wondering what the effect on Manny is when you're flying through the clouds.
I'm sorry, what?
The sort of effect that's on the edge of the mannequin while you're flying through the clouds.
Oh, that's artifacts similar to if we look into the depths. If we look into the depths, you'll see this kind of outline. This will be addressed and solved, so don't worry. Yeah, it's still. I'm sorry, I need to play with it a little bit. Still feels very good. So yeah, this Niagara system is added only to the daytime because it doesn't look quite good when the light is dark. It will look like this, and that's actually fits to a horror theme maybe. Yeah, at night I just use added to the kind of wisps to the clouds. So when you enter, you will see this. I'm not sure is that clear on the stream. Yeah, you can see that.
Yeah, it's coming through.
So it doesn't exist outside of the cloud. And nothing here, pure block. Oh, so the flying molecule is a plugin called Dynamic Flight. You can search that on Marketplace. Pretty nice. Nailed the Iron Man landing. Yeah. So how I did this is you can't actually just read where the cloud is from the GPU, because that's not how it works. The GPU really doesn't really know where the cloud is. It just calculated. So how I did this is similar to a demo I did before. I just did okay. I'll show that demo first. Yeah, sorry, give me a second. I should have opened that before I trying to explain. I was literally reviewing my bullet points 1 minute before the stream. Is it opening up? Sorry. Okay, it's opening up. All right, this is a kind of wave splash. Yeah, don't mind this. This is a wave splash idea I tried when I was first starting learning Niagara. Okay, I need to play it. It's broken, but it works for the current setup. I can adjust the waves. So this is actually just Justin waves. If you don't know what Justin waves is, just search it. It's basically just sine waves stacked together to make the ocean have kind of complex characters. If we zoom out, you can clearly see the pattern. But from this angle, it looks kind of okay. And yeah, you can see the waves actually drive the splashes. The material is not as good as I hope it would be. Can we get a good angle for that? Yeah. This is actually just basically Niagara GPU particles that's marching with the waves. I have set up a debug view here. Too many spheres. All right. Yeah, that's not speeding up.
Is that a sphere per particle right there?
Yep. But why is it so slow? I'm not sure. It shouldn't be. Even there are like 1 million instances, it should be fine.
Well, you are running another editor in the background.
Yeah, but my machine should be able to handle 2 Unreal Engine.
Discord uses up a little bit of GPU as well, especially when you're streaming at 1080p.
All right, just give me some time to adjust the value. This is actually 4.23, and yeah, let me disable a bunch of stuff. Okay, The thing I can do is lower this. Editor, just reset your settings. What rig are you using? What kind of rig? Any resource recommendation for learning remotion for Unreal? Ryan Box have some posts that help me enormous. It's very good. Check him out. And yeah, he has a volumetric plugin. Yeah, the engine really doesn't want to work with me today. 4.23. I'm looking at you. You will not live long in my hard disk. All right. Yeah, I have videos for that. Let me just play the video instead. Give me a second. I'll just answer some questions.
I've gathered some from earlier in the stream. If we can tackle those first.
Okay.
Someone's curious if it's possible to set a bounding box for the volumetric clouds. For example, if you didn't want...
Yeah, I've answered that. It's in the cloud system. Of course it can. That's a very important thing. All right. I have this video.
That was quick.
So the wave we looked before, actually I said this wave is just a wave, and I fit in a exact same parameters into the Niagara system. So the cubes can float in on top of it exactly as it should be. Like, this is not physics. This is not. It's not reading the height of the waves. These are just matching using mass. It rhymes, matching with mass. And yeah, because I'm spawning cubes along the rocks here using distant field rejection sampling, and when the cubes hit, like here, can you see my mouse? I'm not sure. Yes, you can.
Yeah, we see it.
Wait, maybe make it larger. Wait, why do I want to make my own? Okay. So when this part hits the rocks, it will the collision could be calculated from distant field, because these are all GPU particles. When it gets into the distant field, it will kind of switch status. These are all just wave cubes. When it gets into the collision, the distant field collision of the rocks, it will switch into the splash mode, and the velocity is calculated by using the wave speed, the wave velocity, and the angle of how it's crashing onto the rocks. And this is all GPU particles, so it could be very fast, and you can have a lot of them. So that's the basic idea. Is my cursor big enough? And yeah, so that's a similar thing we are doing now, because I've said how the clouds are actually just frame rate is still pretty not good. We're doing. Yeah, this takes 8 milliseconds now because I'm having it on a very high. Yeah, I'm using a very expensive setup, and my material haven't been optimized at all. Like, could be. I'm confident I could reach the same within like 1 or 2 milliseconds. Because this is actually pretty blurry, and the renderer is being improved too. So for the volumetric cloud, the performance would be very good. I could make, yeah. I think I should demonstrate how you could optimize that a little bit. Yeah, if I select to 8, can't really tell too much difference. You might need to pump up the AO a little bit because less sampling means it will be brighter. And the shadow distance, I could lower the shadow count a little bit. Not sure how much it cost. Yeah, that immediately drops to 3.38. And I have some unnecessary sampling in the cloud material, so that could easily half it. And if you and the thing about it, it's very scalable. If you are on a very low hardware, you can have some cloud, but not that sharp. Not like this. If you have you can have a parameter like volumetric volume cloud. No, that's render target. Noise scale. If we decrease this to a little bit, like, wait, what is it? Why is it not working? It has a similar parameters to the temporal weight of the volumetric fog, but I can't remember what that exactly is. And yeah, okay. I didn't really exactly prepare for that part, but the idea is it's very scalable to different hardwares, similar to volumetric fog. It will be blurry and low quality, but it will run on most modern hardwares, but not. I don't think it will run on mobile phone. Maybe it will. I really shouldn't talk about things that I'm not sure. I'm sorry. Forget what I said for the last 20 seconds. Yeah. Let me set it back. So the texture, so we used noise textures to stack together to make the cloud shapes. And the thing I did with Niagara is I basically duplicated that cloud material and made a Niagara module. Yeah, this two does exactly the same thing. This and this. I just kind of put this on the other screen and made the same thing in Niagara module. It sounds painful, but it's not that bad. It took me like 25 minutes. And because the material is the cursor, should I change that back? Because the material is translated into HLSL, and Niagara GPU theme also translates the modules into HLSL language. So if the logic is the same and the input parameters like world position, base scale, time, pen, text, texture is the same as a material graph, the output value, like RGB here, and the final density value here should be 100% synced. So this is how the Niagara can be aware of where the clouds are. And you use something like called rejection sample. Like if the density is lower than 0, it will be killed by setting the data interface.live to false. So that means I have a debug view here. So that means the particles are spawned around the camera. The particles are actually spawned uniformly around the camera in a sphere. But if it find out, oh, I'm outside the cloud, then he just commits suicide, commits Sudoku. And yeah, that's what rejection sample means. Wait. Yeah, another thing that I want to mention is the camera interface. This should have been in 4.25, but not sure version before that. Because we want to spawn particles around the camera, and before we have to have kind of like a BP setup to feed the camera position every frame into the Niagara system using a user variable. But now we have this camera data interface here. It's still experimental, but it works for me at least. For any for any vector, you could just type in camera, and it will have a return camera property. You can just get a camera position, up, forward, right vector, and the vector to camera. And because this is HRSL, so this vector to camera is actually exactly the same as the camera vector in material graph. So that's very convenient. You don't have to have any actual BP setup. You can just use the camera position. And camera position, imagine, yeah. Another very nice thing about this, about the set of Niagara is once you've set up the scene, you could apply any other Niagara modules you want. Like I'm spawning the wisp here, wisps, and it could use wisp. Yeah, no. Just fat fingered my mouse cursor. Yeah, I could add a curl noise force in the particle update to make it kind of move around. If I make the strength higher, it's more obvious how it works. Yeah, just swims around. Like curl noise works with everything. Use it. And yeah, gravity force and some drag because this should be pretty lightweight and shouldn't have too much momentum. So I use a drag so it kind of swims around nicely and slowly, finally. And yeah, that's the thing about Niagara. It's super modularized. Once you made this what I call cloud rejection sample, you can just insert it into everything that you have. You can have explosions that's consumed by the cloud that doesn't explode inside the cloud, even if it doesn't make sense. I'm just making examples. All right. Yeah. So for sprite, yeah, I've mentioned a lot of times that it doesn't. If I had time, show flag particles. Where are my sprites? Where are my sprites? Oh, wait. Yeah, I didn't put anything here. All right, there goes my sprites. If I have time, I would use some techniques to make the sprites move. Sorry. Make the sprites look more volumetric. And that's the thing I happen to have tweeted a while ago on Twitter, and people love that too. I'll just play a video of that. Yeah, so this is called 6-point lab map. It basically bakes the light scattering data into the a texture, 6 or 4 channels. So in the actual engine material setup, you can get the atmospheric directional light direction and decide what kind of decide which channel, what directions you want to use and blend together to get a convincing result. This is just a sprite. And yeah, if I have time, I would like to do that. And you can do that without paying anything because there is an awesome plugin called Volumetric in the engine made by Brian Brooks. By the way, I'm a huge fan of Brian Brooks.
I think we all are.
It's
difficult
I learned so much from him. Oh, is him gonna do a live stream soon?
Yep, that's the plan.
Do you have a date?
Do not have a date yet.
Yeah, do you have
approximated in the next 2 months?
Okay, cool. I very look forward to that. She showed me a lot of stuff. That's very amazing. And yeah, volumetric cloud stuff. And this plugin is called Volumetrics. If you are on 4.25 or later, you can just search Volumetrics in the plugins window here and enable it. Once you enable it, you can access the content here on the Volumetrics content. Just search for fluid sim. You can see some demo map like fluid simulation 3D. Is there a documentation page link for the built-in plugin somewhere? I'm not sure, but this is actually pretty straightforward. For blueprints, I feel like the best documentation is comments in the blueprints because it's very easy to read. And just mess with things. Have your way with it. And that's the best way to learn, I think. Of course, documentation is important, but because our engine has evolved so fast and there has something called opportunity cost. If we spend a lot of time into making documentations, that's the time we could have been put into making the engine more awesome. So there is always a balance. So yeah, but we are actively trying to make document for importances. But for like in development plugins like this one, it might be tricky to document it. Yeah. Do not pipette. I did that. Okay. What is it? I should stop reading chat. Okay. Yeah. If you press simulate, it will do this. By the way, our documentation is pretty awesome. I'm just explaining why it doesn't cover 100% of everything.
And we usually ship with some of these new features. There are usually example projects as well that are accompanied once the feature goes out of experimental and or beta. So when it actually ships.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It sounds like some guys in the chat feels like I'm making excuse for it, but actually there's so much features in the engine. I completely understand why we can't cover all of that. And so yeah, this is a simulation, and you can play around with it. There are parameters like curl strength. This is all simulated by the material, and there's some buoyancy. I'm just make a very short introduction to it. I haven't used it too much, but it's very fun to play with. And another thing I have just learned recently is it can capture flipbooks directly inside the engine. So it's called the BP sub UV maker here. And it can capture color and opacity, velocity, normal, and spherical, harmonic, which is just another fancy name for the 66 direction light maps I just mentioned. Wait, what are you doing? Okay, cool. Yeah. And if we click wrong actor. Yeah, we can see the render targets here. It's not filled in completely because it just ran a very short time. This is the opacity, color and opacity. This is normal. This is a thing that you could use with, this is a 60-point map that you could use with whatever material you got. I feel like I should, yeah, I'm gonna release something including the 60 material I just got. Like, can we just edit that in the forum page, a stream forum page for the 60 map? Like, we are planning to release something for the cloud too, but currently I'm still talking with Sebastian Hilaire, who is making the feature in order to kind of, I want to release something fun for you to play with, but we need to do some cleaning up and to make things easier for you to understand before I can do that. Yeah, this is a Volumetric plugin. Enable it, play with it. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, there is another third-party software I want to mention too called Amberjam. That's pretty awesome to make flipbooks for video games. This is, yeah, GPU theme. It runs in real time. Just show some really quick example of it. So this could be cooked into a flipbook and played as a particle skate and get some like dry ice to it. And it supports the 6 lights as well. So what I can do is I make some generic simulation without too much gravity. That just go poof, 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 and play the flipbook with 6 points direct map in the cloud, so it will react to the light and looks good. Yep, explosion. That's just very short mention here. Yeah, another thing I wanted to do but didn't have the time to is this one. Yeah, it's not free. This is a demo I did a while ago, just for fun. You can see the fire is slowly creeping outside the circle. And this has been used in video game quite a lot. What I'm pretty proud of is this sphere mask is actually not calculated every frame. When I shoot something on the grass, actually this it records the time of the impact. So because we are recording the time of the impact, we could smooth out that time so it could slowly creeping outside. And this is so the grass material could just raise that texture to slowly have a texture shader based effects. But we can also see there is a fire spice here. This is generated by Niagara too, because Niagara could read the texture the same way as the material. So yeah, and another thing is let me run this again. If I draw a line here, wait, I should move. If I draw a line here, and I move over here, and yeah, pay attention to this part. I kind of feel like I should use my cursor. Like, pay attention to this part. And if I show again, boom, you can see that kind of teleports to this part. That's because the render target space is actually follows my character. So the center is always where I'm standing. So that means I have just virtually unlimited range. I could run to an open world map, and that render target will just follow me. I could just continue doing this until the end of the year. And yeah, what this can do with the volumetric fog, as you have already imagined, is of course the volumetric and the volumetric effects, including the fog and the cloud, the materials and everything, and the Niagara modules could all access these render targets. That means if I hit this, it could disturb the fog, give it a corners look. It could have a Toronto. Wait, what's that? Toronto? What's that? What's that word for that? So the chat will know what I'm talking about. Toretto. Wait. Yeah, tornado. All right, sorry. I shouldn't be sorry. That's I just didn't know that. Yeah, you can have turbulent, you can have swirly tornado when you are you can have like wind here to advect the volumetric fog and make it feel like there is really hot air flow, buoyancy, hot air buoyancy, and because this is very hot, it could just clear the fog above it to make a hole or something. And yeah, you can even inject black dark smoke into the volumetric fog to make it look more awesome. So yeah, this is that's quite a lot of work, so I didn't have time to do that, but it will definitely work. I think it will be awesome. You guys can look up. I think Uncharted 4 have a talk about it or similar effects. So yeah, that's actually pretty much what I prepared for today's talk, and that's nearly 2 hours. Wow,
nearly 2 hours indeed.
And yeah, I was afraid I wouldn't feel enough time, but it's usually just longer.
Well,
than I expected.
Let's try to take a couple minutes for questions, and then I think for the outstanding ones that are sort of specific to some of the things you showed off, I'll make sure to pass Asher all the questions, and then maybe you can fill in some answers on the forum announcement post after the stream, if you're able to answer them.
Yeah, I'm. I have a lot of energy left. Chat.
All right.
Challenge me.
Across the board, viewers who are interested in sort of if it's possible to break down the performance impact they should expect when they're working with volumetric clouds.
Sorry, can you read that again?
Yeah, there were several questions around sort of the performance impact that they can expect when you're working with volumetric clouds?
Yeah, because that's very new, and I just started playing with it a week ago. I'm not like super attentive to talk about that, but how our engine made it is always is very important feature will have great scalability, which means you can just put whatever budget you have to the cloud. And I'm sorry, I can't find your Discord window. Okay. And yeah, because we have a lot of filtering options, like just like volumetric fog, I think it will look pretty great. And the code is actually very fast, faster than everything I've used before as a rematcher. And yeah, I'm super happy about it. Like the 4-6 milliseconds you see today is actually me abusing the system because I have a 2080 Ti, so I could just do whatever I want to just experiment with it. And I use kind of, I don't know, around 10 texture sampling, which is crazy for what you against what you should do. So yeah, that I don't think performance will be a problem. And as you can see, a lot of games like Horizon Zero Dawn, and Red Dead Redemption have all put remaster into their game to make awesome volumetric effects. So yeah, it will work with PS4, no problem.
Any way to reduce the volumetric beam lag/ghosting with fast-moving lights without crushing performance?
Crushing, yeah, I've answered that before. Yeah, you've read the question before for me. Is this volumetric? You can search volumetric weight. There is a volumetric fog.history weight. That's defaulted at 0.9. Okay, let me make a quick example of it. Can we get a link to your guest station or something? Someone is asking for my tweet handle. All right. We can see the ghosting here. If I just adjust the r.volumetric fog dot a history weight to something like 0.99, you can see the ghosting is super strong because it's trying to make it as smooth as possible. So against that, we could do like 0.8 or something crazy like 0.1. You can see it's flickering a lot, but the ghosting is absolutely not there. So it's kind of balance between how smooth you want your light to be and how responsive you want it to be. You can have 0.7. 0.7 works, but 0.6. 0.6 works for my eyes. And if you increase volumetric fog grid size Z to something like 256, and yeah, it looks pretty good. But of course, the cost is doubled. It's well, that's a lot. Why is it so much? It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be 4 milliseconds. Yeah, this is normal setting. It's a 1 millisecond. And yeah, if your volumetric works only on the near side, you could cheat by using a smaller distance and using smaller grid size Z would be even cheaper. Yeah, that was the thing I wanted to talk about, and I forgot what it is. just pass me the next question.
We can do the next question.
Yeah, I lost track of my thought of train.
In
Train of
regards,
thought.
I think this question was in regards to the volumetric clouds. They were wondering if they work with ray traced shadows.
Oh, I'll answer that one too.
Okay. And the answer is yes, no. If someone tune in a little later.
It's complex.
Okay.
Yeah, it's volumetric remarching method usually doesn't work because it's kind of similar to retracing, but retracing we currently have retraced AO and engine retracing actually is an array of features that could work on top of the current default render pipeline. So if the remarcher want to work with, if the cloud want to work with remarching, it kind of requires some complete different philosophy. I'm not completely sure with that, but currently no, currently not really. The volumetric cloud and volumetric fog doesn't work with retracing currently, and yeah, I'm not sure about that question.
Might be able to bring it up when we get Ryan on the stream.
Yep. Hey, Ryan.
Someone was wondering if this is also in regards to the volumetric clouds, if it's possible for them to give their own shadow.
Volumetric, yeah, it had volumetric self shadow.
No, I believe they were wondering if it's possible to have a shadow on the ground from the clouds.
Yeah, you can. Let me try. I haven't tried it, but
let's do it live.
Sebastian said it could be done. All right, challenge accepted. To the ground. Yeah. A thing I have tried is wait, what? Oh, I use the sun sky. Okay. The thing I have tried is the directional light. You can enable cloud shadow on it, but that will result in a lot of solid error. Wait, what is this? Cast cloud shadows. Is this actually the? Yeah, from the video I've seen, the cloud definitely can cast shadow on ground and looks very nice and have guard rays and everything. But my use case here is a little special because the cloud wasn't being used on the ground before. So that probably doesn't work for this, but it should work for this one. For this one. Was that ads?
Sorry, just managing chat for a little bit. Yeah, I think the question was if they can draw it. Seems like it's in the works.
Give me a bit. Direct. Where's my lap? Huh. Alright, I haven't done that before. I think I just failed the challenge. I'm sorry, chat. Yeah, because I only used it for a week, so not super familiar with it. But it definitely can be done. I've seen videos. Yeah, you should have seen videos of guard rays and cloud shadows onto the ground and everything that works. But we're not spending time to experiment with it on stream.
Well, I can bring that up with Ryan. We can see if we can do it later as well. Or if you come across it, we can just talk about it in the forum announcement thread, which if you are just tuning in through Twitch, we do announce the streams on the events page of the Unreal Engine forums, as well as on the schedule on Twitch, but all the information exists on the forums. Let's see, you might have touched on this as well. One of the questions was, any way to add localized layered textures, like a supercell storm cloud blowing through?
Localized what?
Localized layered textures.
Layered textures.
So I believe they're asking if they can
Localized.
layer textures on top of the height map for the clouds, to sort of adjust the final effect of the clouds to like have a tornado come through.
Yeah, of course you can do that. That's just how you can do it. Yeah, these are all on the landscape, but if you want, you could. We have Niagara models currently called Grid 2D. You could do simulations entirely within Niagara. So, like if you stand here and you want some wind or bullet or explosion to affect the fog or cloud, you could totally do the simulation in Niagara 2D and have a texture to the output, like render target, and use the render target to put on top of the current setup, like mine or whatever you're using. It's just it can be done. It's just how you do it. By the way, I will write about the Niagara simulation in a few days, maybe a week. I have been reading that. I have been writing that before you asked me to do the stream. So yeah, stay tuned to asher.gg and my Twitter handle. I typed that in chat.
It's also on the forum announcement post.
Yep.
Let's see, we can do a few more minutes here.
And yeah, and someone asked about the demo with the grass file rendering target. Yeah, I will upload it if you guys want to look into it. I will tweet that and I will put that in the Froome announcements post. Yep.
You got it. They were curious what specifications your PC has. You mentioned you have a 2080 Ti. What's the CPU?
It's not as good. It's just a i9.
Pretty good.
That's kind of low spec for Epic standards.
Yeah, when you compile the engine over and over and over,
yeah,
it helps to have a little bit of horsepower.
It's so slow, guys. I'm like in pain. It's a torture.
See if we can work on that. Does the cloud shadowing only work for a main directional light, like a sun or a moon, or would it also work for, say, an extremely large spotlight?
Not currently, no. It doesn't work. It does only work with skylight and directional light. The Niagara tutorial right up in a few days will be on my website, and I will tweet it. So whatever way you are following me, you will be able to see that. I do pretty good Twitter marketing.
Let's see. Someone was curious how the detail is getting better when you get into the cloud.
How to make the details better when I get into the cloud?
Yeah, they're asking how it gets better when you get into the cloud. Is that a mix because of the blend between the clouds and the fog?
So he's asking how I could make that better if I have more time?
No, so
Like
I believe he saw that the detail got better when you were flying into the cloud.
The actual shape is actually not better, and the actual shape is still like this, and it got better because the natural volumetric fog, it can react to the lights, and because the shadows, you just think your brain tells you that looks better, and the details are actually, yeah, there are two layers of the details I mentioned before. One is a ground fog, which is another layer of volumetric fog added on top of that, which the volumetric cloud doesn't have, and another layer of these sprites. And I haven't showed this. Wait, have I showed it? I don't remember. It's the details are mainly the two things I added on top of the volumetric fog.
There was another question. How do you know when it would be better for performance to use a Raymar shader for volumetric rather than the exponential height fog approach?
Exponential height fog. Exponential height fog is mainly for it's kind of uniform heighted, and you can't really have shapes and stuff. The exponential height fog will always have better performance, I think, because it doesn't really have to calculate a lot of voxels. It's just there. And the volumetric fog is actually a option that's embedded into the exponential height fog, because it makes sense when you have a global height fog like that. I have disabled it for the sake of clarity, but if I set it to something this here, and you can see this didn't have fog before, but if we set it to a small value, it will have volumetric fog when I'm getting close. The way you can tell it's volumetric fog is you can see the line shafts, and there is a maximum view distance on the exponential height fog actor, and if this pixel is beyond the distance, it will be replaced by the height fog. Like you can see, there is a pretty clear blending line here. Like beyond that, it's exponential fog, and this is volumetric fog. You can scale it. If you are on like mobile, you can just disable the volumetric fog, and if you are on PS5, you can have super dense volumetric fog with high resolution, so the light shaft looks much better and sharp.
See, someone's curious if does this work with all right, we're all good.
Call 911.
Yep, it happens. I know how that goes. Here, let me just speak while I'm good at take a sip at the same time. I'm just gonna wait for Asher to be able to hear my question before I ask it.
Well, I survived.
All right, you would also
I inhaled the volumetric fog. Is bad for your body.
Now, if you add a filter, they were curious if, I believe this is also in regards to the volumetric clouds, if it works with world composition and the toolset succeeding it in 426.
Sorry again?
They were wondering, and I believe this was in regards to the volumetric clouds, if it works with world composition and the toolset succeeding it in 426.
What toolset succeeding it into?
I believe there are some changes to.
So why is that? How is that related to volumetric fog? Is it about world composition?
I think they're wondering if it applies to all of the tiles in the world composition, or if you need to implement it specifically for each sublevel that you're loading.
I don't think it needs to be. It's kind of a global effects like post effects, and exponential height fog only have one in the scene, and you can have two layers of exponential height fog by using the second fog data, but you shouldn't have more than one of this. So really doesn't matter if you're using word composition or not. You should have at least a persistent level to put in
or a lighting
post-processor and everything. So
atmosphere.
just put it there and you'll be good.
Yeah, just make sure that level is always loaded, whether you like to put your lights and all of the effects into a sub-level that's always loaded or just in the persistent one. I recommend a sub-level because then you can check it out and collaborate on it.
Yep.
They were curious about the world, so the landscape and the scene.
It's called Skyscape. No. Yes, Stylescape is in the marketplace. I just grabbed it and made some small adjustment to the colors. It works with clouds. Looks great. Yep, and made some small adjustment to the terrain here.
Did see a couple more questions coming in. Which engine version? Just want to reiterate that this is from the dev rendering branch on GitHub. If you haven't downloaded and compiled engine from source before, it can be a good practice, especially if you're working on something and the fix only exists in one of the branches on GitHub. It can be good to be able to know how to download that, compile it, and then change your project into, say, dev rendering or another one to be able to, say, maybe fix a bug that was shipped on GitHub but not in the binary version of the launcher, and then package your game for that, and then eventually the fix will come back to the binary version of the launcher, and then you can continue reiterating on that version. Someone was curious if you have any resource recommendations for learning ray marching in Unreal.
Yeah, I learned that from Ryan Brock's posts, and because he had demos, you can download that. Find it. It's GDC 16, I think. I just search for Ryan Brock's remarching. He had a lot of posts about it, and if you just want to, if you want to learn about that, fine. Of course, go ahead. If you are a tech artist and just want to play with it, I highly recommend you to just use a renderer that's on dev rendering, because remarching, if you want to do something simple, it's very fun and very good for learning shaders. But the actual engineering and embedded with a lot of engine features and optimization is it's very hard, and it's very hard, and this thing did a good job, and it's been developed for a few months by a senior engineer who was working for this for a long time. So if you just want results, just use this. If you want to learn, go ahead.
All right, and I think with the construction continuing right outside my house and the fact that we are 2 hours and 20 minutes into the stream, I think it's about time for us to call this a day. Asher, I want to give you a big, super big thanks for coming on the stream and showing off also some of the cool tech. If people want to find out more about you and your work, where would they go?
First check out Rembrandt's blogs. This is a gold mine here. You can learn about a lot of volumetric remarcher and other practical tricks. And if you want to find me, I'm on asher.gg. This is my blog, and my Twitter is Volumetric. Here. Yeah. VUTH RIC.
It's also linked in the forum announcement post in the event section of our forums. Awesome. I think with that said, I'm still looking for countdown videos. We are looking for countdown videos. If you have been watching this from the beginning of the stream, thanks for sticking around. Hope you've been having a good time. The first 5 minutes, we do a little countdown, which is 30 minutes of development recorded in the editor, and then fast forward that up to 5 minutes. Send that to us without any logos composited, but please send your logo with it, and then we will add the countdown as well as your logo there, and it might become one of the countdown videos that we have in our rotation. Also, make sure that you let us know about all the cool stuff you're working on, the release work in progress channels on the forums, Unreal Slackers. Hit us up on Twitter, Discord. We're pretty much all over the place. Make sure to let us know what we're doing, and you might be featured as one of our spotlights. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, all the social medias out there. Make sure you give Asher a follow as well. And then next week, I had a quick little... I remember what we're doing next week. Next week, Andreas, one of our evangelists, are coming on. We're going to make a game from scratch. Something that he's been working on. I'm pretty excited about that.
Oh, is that the boat thing?
Don't give the surprise away. It's not a boat thing. It's definitely not a boat thing.
Not a boat.
Not a boat. Nope. That's not the way it works. With that said, I hope you all tune in next week. Had a good time. Stay safe out there. And with that said, we're saying goodbye from this time. Thanks again, Asher. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you again. Thanks to the chat. I had a really good time. I was scared and very nervous, but yeah, I went with the flow, and you guys are awesome. I had a really good time. Thank you.
I think we can say you did fantabulously, which is the word I just made up. With that said, I'll see you all next week. Bye, everyone.